Welcome to the latest in my series of mediatel interviews with marketing leaders in which we explore their media choices and habits in this rapidly changing digital world. Today I'm joined by Rob Rees, who calls himself the first or the original interim Chief Marketing Officer. He did that 15 years ago when, after a conventional marketing career in Unilever, Mars and Pepsi, he then took the interim role in projects for companies such as Vodafone Multimedia, Orange, Bernard Matthews, Dairy Crest and Scottish Widows, where I think you fired the widow. Welcome, Rob, but why did you have to do that?
Infamy. I think it was a strategic reason, actually. Amanda had become better known as a celebrity for all her appearances on home finding programs around Europe, and obviously the widow had always been this quite mystical secret woman, and we decided it was time to change the widow and move on. We were doing a big brand relaunch. We needed a new look and feel for the brand, and so unfortunately we had to say goodbye to Amanda, but obviously she'd been a great servant to the company and we tried our best to let her go gently. So.
But it got a lot of publicity at the time.
It did get a lot of publicity at the time, but we also had the new widow coming on board, so that was obviously some good news that we could bring to consumers as well.
So why don't you stay anywhere longer? What do you like about being an interim CMO?
I like the challenge, I like the fresh challenge, and I think marketing has changed so much from when I started out 25 years ago at Unilever. Even in the last 15 years it's changed dramatically, but obviously in the last 5 years it's changed even more dramatically. And I could see back in '99 when I decided to step outside of a conventional corporate life that I needed to keep my skills fresh and broaden my skill set, because if you stick in an industry for a long period of time you can become quite stale and you can sort of run out of technical skills. So I could see all the changes that were happening with obviously the big tech boom as was at the end of the 90s. Obviously the whole thing around CRM, the whole thing around contact centres, service brands, customer journeys, all those things were starting to kick off. So I thought it was really important to keep up to date. I suppose I've got a morbid inbuilt fear of obsolescence, I suppose, for an insecurity deep down there. But I just like marketing, and I think when you go up more senior in a business, you often end up administrating and you get very far removed from the consumers and the things that you actually enjoy doing from a young age. So I actually do the interim work because I get my hands onto big meaty problems, I keep myself fresh, and I keep extending my skill set, and I think that's very, very important to keep up to date, and that's more so than ever before.
Indeed, you've got such a broad range of experience. How is digital changing the way marketers operate?
In certain businesses, it's absolutely revolutionising it. I would say in certain businesses, it's quite irrelevant actually, because I suppose I've tended to gravitate much more towards service brands, where obviously you're delivering the customer experience through and the product through people and through a number of channels. So for example, my recent project was with Denby, who had its own shops, had its own website, sold through third parties like Debenhams. So that was very, very interesting, because not only do you have to use digital as a sort of, if you like, a communication vehicle, you had to use it as a service vehicle for your own shops, you had to use it as a marketing vehicle for your own website, to build loyalty, to drive volume. So I think it was very, very instrumental, and it was a very valuable tool for a business like Denby, because it didn't have pots of money, it was private equity owned, it was trying to make sure every investment in the marketing agenda paid back. So actually vital tool was actually changing that business, because instead of being beholden to intermediary retailers, it now stood a chance of really being in control of its own destiny by having a very strong website business itself, direct to consumer, and then obviously its own shop. So actually a business that could have, if you like, been repositioned out of the world completely by technology. It embraced technology, been very, very brave, and has actually sought to start to transform its future by having that direct link with the consumer again.
Television seems to be still thriving, despite the fact everybody said it would be killed by the internet, but other media seem to be more vulnerable, newspapers, radio. What's your take on that?
Well, certainly I have seen that exact same effect. I mean, I did launch an insurance business in 2005, when actually selling off the page was very, very strong, and we got very good cost per acquisition. It was very, very effective, but within 2 years that had dropped off a cliff. So I remember going to the next project, which was a holiday company, selling off the page there, tried using the same techniques, and it failed. But then you started to look at other things like inserts into newspapers, and they were more effective, because effectively you could communicate much more of the product than, say, in a small black and white ad. You could communicate much more about the richness of the holiday experience and the quality of the brand and the service. So actually it got you to think again and evolve into a different space. I know you look at, maybe it's gone too far, you open a Sunday paper now and you tip out a whole paper's worth of catalogue. So I think maybe it's gone too far, and so there's maybe
It's funny, we do sometimes ask people about their green credentials, and indeed a former interviewee actually stopped all of the mail shots and all of those, all of that paper, but you're not doing that.
I think it's always worth trying these things. It's not necessarily relevant for all businesses, but I certainly know at Denby we were just about to launch a Christmas catalogue again. So, but obviously the desired route is to acquire address details and drive them to the web ultimately. That's the best way. They're going to get the best range of products, they're going to get the best service, and they're going to understand more about the brand, because obviously the richness of that whole website is not just about the e-commerce aspect, but it's also about the history and the heritage and bringing the brand story. So I think all these vehicles are ultimately, certainly in terms of the way I was approaching it, was to pick up people's addresses and get them to register. So.
Data is hugely important now, but consumers are a bit worried that you know far too much about them and could misuse it.
I think you've got to treat all the data with respect. And I think the danger is it's the same old issue. You've got to talk to people about something they're interested in. You're not going to be able to force your way into their lives. If you haven't got a relevant message, they're not going to be interested. But for example, at Denby, we have built a very, very strong database for the size of the business, but we actually asked our customers if they'd like to be involved with helping us develop the new products. So we effectively created a market research panel, and actually, surprisingly, over 5,000 people volunteered because they loved the brand so much. And actually, we were really giving them some very worthwhile content. They felt that they were real opinion formers. And over the last year, we probably ran about 10 surveys, and the number of responses was incredible. Each time you get 3,000 or 4,000 people responding to these questions about, do you like this new product? Do you like the colour of this mug? What do you think of this? What do you think of that? And they really, really loved it. Almost it felt it was their duty to complete the questionnaire. And many weeks we'd have people saying, "Is the questionnaire closed yet? Can we still send our responses?" So that was a positive way of using the data. Ultimately, you've got to give people something that is of interest to them, and that still relies on some of those old market research techniques, whether it's doing focus groups, understanding what your brand's all about, checking what your competitor's doing. So understanding your customer is not just about big data and loads of CRM whiz-bang tools. It's still some of the basic stuff, I think. And just getting out and about, watching consumers, going into shops. So lots of the old techniques are still valid.
Does social media play much of a part, Facebook, Twitter and so on, in what you're doing?
I think so. I think certainly when I've arrived at some clients, they are playing with social media and they don't really have a strategy. They're not clear why they're going to use each platform and what target audience they're going after and what sort of content is going to influence them. But yes, I have. It's always been the lowest priority in terms of the e-commerce agenda that I've inherited, because often in a lot of these businesses there's some real basic things that still need fixing. So getting a good website, getting a responsive website, being very good at paid for search, getting a better SEO campaign. There's a lot of basics that haven't been done. But social is there, and I think it was particularly enjoyable at Denby because we did have such a passionate fan base, very loyal users. There's a view that over half the households in Britain have got some sort of Denby in their cupboard. One of the downsides of it lasting so long and being unbreakable, and that there in itself caused the problem because it obviously by nature became out of date because it lasted so long. But actually there was quite an engagement and respect for the brand, and you could engage it by getting people to share things about their home, about their cooking, about all sorts of things. So actually it was quite fun. We also show them an awful lot about the behind the scenes. So if we were ever making a TV ad or we're making a new product, we'd show them pictures of the shoot. We'd talk to them about the people that worked there when people had retired, who perhaps worked 30 years in the business. We gave them the life story of Tony or Gemma or whatever, and that it just made it quite real and friendly. So I think if it's used in the right way, the days of sort of ramming messages down people's throats are gone. So you've got to be very careful how you use it, because people will see you as being disingenuous and just latching onto the latest trend otherwise.
And what's your relationship with your agencies, media agencies, creative agencies? Is it changing again because of the way the media are changing?
I think the relationships have always been good. I mean, they're always the best parts of any marketing job because you're with the brightest people, with the people that are always trying to push the envelope, and with people that are trying to do new things and invent new things. I think marketing is all about starting with a sheet of blank paper and trying to create the future, and that's what's quite exciting about the job. It's what's quite different to a lot of other functional jobs. If you're in logistics or in finance, it's a very black and white job, it's a very finite job, and that's one of the great difficulties and ambiguities of marketing, is you are trying to embrace all these new things. So I think a lot of the agencies, media agencies and creative agencies, have struggled with the new world. I think a lot of advertising agencies still pay lip service to it. They've had the opportunity to reinvent themselves for 15 years now. The issue of integrated marketing has been there for 15 years. But so many of the agencies are still advertising factories. and they've bolted on digital aspects. I think there are some agencies out there that have started from ground zero and got their roots in social and online. And I think they are obviously then having to learn some of those grown-up skills. But I think that there's a real need now for some of these big agency groups to wake up. I think a lot of them have really survived on the growth spurt of globalization. The big networks, the BBDOs, the Interpublics, they really took clients and took them globally, and that's how they've managed to grow, by basically still doing some of the old tricks. But I think when you come to a market like the UK that's very, very competitive, where costs are, budgets are under review on the client side all the time, and where costs are very, very tight, it's going to force people to reinvent themselves. I think also with technology, it's very easy to buy a GoPro, it's very easy to buy a good digital camera, there's lots of very, very simple editing tools out there. So clients, with a little bit of courage, can create some of their own content. So there's various ways that some of the established ways of creating content are going to change. And I think if I was an advertising agency, I'd be quite worried at the moment. I think media agencies is slightly different, because I think there's a level of technical nous and data which has allowed them to be good at what they've done in the past, whether it's buying TV slots or whether it's buying advertising space in a newspaper. So I think they're automatically predisposed towards being able to actually often professionalise some of those internet businesses that have been in the past not cottage industries, but haven't been that structured. So they can bring all those media buying, planning, assessment tools into some of the new digital space. So I think the media agencies are probably better placed. I think the creative agencies have really got to look at themselves long and hard, because I don't know many clients that can afford big retainers. And I go into most organisations as an interim, and there's so much fat you can strip out. There's lots of little pet projects going on. There's too many people involved in the decisions. They've got an agency staff of 10 people to man-mark the 10 clients, when actually the marketing director should be getting on with this with one or two trusted aides. And I think there's so much fat in those organisations that these advertising agencies just have to look at themselves. How can they afford big offices in the West End, and how can the days where every account director had a Porsche? I know a lot of those have gone, but there's still quite a lot of excess, and I think a lot of clients aren't just impressed by. I'm certainly not impressed by nice boardrooms and almond croissants in a morning meeting. We want a lot more than that now, because everybody's having to fight for every last pound. And I think if it doesn't have value, you don't do it these days. I mean, that's what the recession has brought us. We appreciate quality, and we appreciate clever ideas, but we don't want to pay for the fat anymore.
And what about media owners? What sort of relationship do you have with them, and could they do things better for you?
I've generally not had close relationships with the media owners. That's generally been handled by the media buying agencies. But I think their job is to create great content, isn't it? Their job is to be absolutely in tune with the new target audiences and the emerging trends out there. So if they're not informing, back down through the chain, then there's a problem.
Finally, what are your own media consumption habits?
I think I've become addicted to the Sky Plus box. I've got into a lot of these HBO series recently. There's Sky Atlantic I'm quite enjoying, so I can sometimes have very slothful Sunday afternoons when I'm catching up on 3 or 4 episodes. I am an active user of social media. I do a lot of Instagramming. I think I'm up to about 500 posts now. And I just generally post about things that I know my friends will be interested in. So it's whether it's Chelsea Football Club or Borussia Dortmund, or whether it's playing golf, or whether it's skiing, or whether it's just beautiful scenery. I like to share that. I think the most likes I've ever had for an Instagram picture is 25, so that was a big achievement. I think I'm up to about 500 followers. So I've generally got interested in it because I knew I had to keep interested in it through the job. Facebook generally share things with friends, like articles that they might like. Obviously, a massive user of LinkedIn, power user of LinkedIn, because obviously that's pretty important for me to find my next work. And more work is coming through, people seeing you on that and having a very good profile. With like all these things, you have to be able to game the algorithms on LinkedIn. So you've got to do the recommendations, you've got to do the endorsements, you've got to keep putting news out there. So I use LinkedIn. I think it's a very, very good platform. But I suppose my greatest joy is sitting down and still reading the sports pages of the Telegraph and flicking through a nice golf magazine. So I've got the whole gamut from very traditional to very modern. But I think if you're in marketing, you're interested in the consumers. I certainly I have an insatiable desire to learn things about all sorts of things. People often tell me I'll be great in the pub quiz team. So I think it's great. You can consume as much or as little of the media as you like, and I certainly find it, when I lean over in the morning to pick up the phone, it is quite a nice way to wake up and stimulate your brain with some stuff about news about what you're interested in. So I try and consume as much as is physically possible in this mad world of ours. So.
Rob Rees, thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Torin. Thank you.